through 9 weeks of the NFL season, which means we are officially halfway through the NFL season. Some teams have played 8 games, some teams have played 9, and a lot of things have changed from the beginning of the season in our power rankings. And so we're, as always, going to go through our power rankings for Week 10 of the NFL season. But before we get into the video, I want to take a second to ask you to please subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications. Really helps us out. If you're a fan of the NFL, you'll love this channel as we release multiple NFL-related videos every Thursday and Saturday all year long. Now, let's get back to the video. Starting off, as always, with our bottom 12 teams, and the bottom 12 remains unchanged in terms of who the 12 teams are that are down here, but the order has changed slightly. I moved the Jets up a fair bit after they did beat the Houston Texans, albeit at home and on Thursday Night Football. Still a good win for the Jets. They do have some talent on the roster. I moved them up a little bit, but again, they still only have 3 wins. It's tough to put them higher than 23rd on this list, especially when you see teams that are from 11 to 20 and the top 10. Additionally, we have the Saints falling all the way to dead last in our power rankings after a loss to the Carolina Panthers. That's right. The New Orleans Saints, who started off 2-0, who everyone thought was the best team in football and was going to be winning a Super Bowl, having their home Super Bowl in New Orleans this year, is now dead last in the power rankings after losing 7 straight games and firing Dennis Allen and having Michael Thomas going on basically podcasts and Twitter and everywhere saying that Derek Carr is the worst QB and the worst human being in the history of ever. And, apparently that's okay now. Either way, being a massive fall for grace for the New Orleans Saints. And, just in general, all these teams have been pretty bad. The Miami Dolphins, I expected to move up a little bit, but even in the 2 games they've had since they got back to Tagovailoa, they've lost both those games, albeit an impressively close game where they only lost on a 61-yard field goal to a very high-ranked team in the Buffalo Bills. Still, the Dolphins, with those 2 losses in their, I believe, 2-6 or 2-7 now in the season, yeah, they belong down here with the worst of the worst in the NFL. Now moving into our middle 10 teams, and much like the bottom 12, these are the same 10 teams that were here last week. I feel like there's actually pretty big divide in terms of the bottom 12, the middle 10, and the top 10. It's shockingly easy to bifurcate these teams into these 3 buckets. It's a lot harder to split them up into their individual spots. The biggest faller on this list is the Chicago Bears after losing to the Arizona Cardinals. They've fallen 6 spots from number 13 in last week's power rankings to 19 in this week. They have had the opportunity to be a significantly higher team. And there was a period of time where we were looking at them, along with the rest of the NFC North, as the greatest division in football history. And it still has the potential to go down as that good a division, but if Caleb Williams plays like he has the last couple of weeks, as opposed to what he did during the middle part of the first half of the season, then the Chicago Bears will let down the rest of the NFC North, failing to allow them to be considered the greatest division of all time. At least that's my opinion on it. We also had teams like the Bengals, Chargers, and Cardinals with some pretty big wins, moving up a little bit in our power rankings. All of these teams are going to be competing for the playoffs. The Chargers and Cardinals actually look to be in pretty decent shape for the playoffs. Cardinals will need to fend off the 49ers, who are getting Christian McCaffrey back, which is why they still land here at number 11 in our power rankings, despite not winning or losing this past week due to being on bye. And the Bengals, they're not totally in a playoff position right now, but the AFC is a lot weaker than what we thought coming into the season, and so they still have a reasonable chance to win enough games to make a wild card in the AFC. I don't think they're going to win the division. You got the Ravens and the Steelers in the AFC North that are going to make it quite difficult for the Bengals to get a divisional win, but they definitely could lock up one of the wild card spots, especially seeing as it seems like the Chargers and the Broncos are probably the most likely teams to be filling those wild card spots, at least based on where we are currently in the NFL season. Now moving on to our top 10. At number 10, we have the Houston Texans falling 2 spots from number 8 on our previous week's iteration of the power rankings after a loss on the road to the New York Jets. That is a pretty tough loss for the Texans to take. I thought about dropping them out of this top 10, but I do think they're still a little above teams like the 49ers and the Falcons based on what they've done so far this season. But again, this is a team that hasn't dominated anybody and has lost some games that they really probably shouldn't have lost. And so it's tough to put them any higher than number 10 on this list. If I saw a bit more of convincing play from CJ Stroud and the Houston Texans, I'd be willing to give them a bit more of the benefit of the doubt. move them a bit higher on this list, but seeing as they're only one of 3 teams that has 3 losses that is still in the top 10, it's tough to have them higher than number 10 when CJ Stroud fails to produce against any decent or better defense on the road, and that's likely going to come in the playoffs, and if they're not going to be able to win those games, I don't think this team is going to go much further than the divisional round, and that's not going to be enough for the Texans to be higher than 10th on this list. At number 9, moving up one spot from where they were in the power rankings last week, we have the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles have looked pretty darn good in recent weeks, definitely moving up in terms of where I view them. I talked about in the last few power ranking videos that I really thought there was a bit of a gap between number 9 and number 10 where I had the Eagles. I thought the Eagles belonged more with the group that we talked about in 11 through 20 than they did in the top 10. But I've changed my tune on this. They actually have impressed me for the past couple of weeks in a row. Losing A.J. Brown might be pretty significant if it's a long-term injury for the Eagles, but Saquon Barkley alone is enough to make this team competitive, and the defense has been surprisingly effective on the 2024 season, significantly improved over the 2023 variant of this team. And so, while I still think there's a lot of improvement for the Eagles to have, they are a competitive team, and they belong here in the top 10 at number 9. And at number 8, we have the Green Bay Packers plummeting 5 spots from number 3 on our previous iteration of the power rankings. You might question why I'm knocking the Green Bay Packers so significantly down 5 spots when they lost to the Detroit Lions, a team that only has 1 loss and is in the number 1 seed in the NFC for a reason. And it's just because the Green Bay Packers lost by, a fair margin in that game. It wasn't really a close game like their other 2 losses were to the Eagles at number 9 on this power ranking, and the Vikings yet to come on this power ranking. It was also a home game at Lambeau in the rain. Everything said this should have gone the direction of the Packers, but the Lions just kind of dominated the Packers from start to finish. Yes, it did take a couple of 4th down touchdowns for the Lions to win that game, along with a pick 6, but they looked to be the better team. They looked to have the upper hand throughout the majority of the game. The Packers looked to basically be on the back foot of the game outside the first quarter of the game, which was literally just a field goal drive for the Packers and a field goal drive for the Lions, and that was it. And as I said briefly when talking about the Houston Texans, there are only 3 teams in our top 10 that have 3 losses. And so it's tough to put a team that's sitting on 3 losses any higher than number 8 if we haven't seen anything that says this team is special and maybe the record doesn't quite show it. And so because of that, we have the Packers dropping to 8th on our power rankings this week, down 5 spots. At number 7, moving up 2 spots, we have the Washington Commanders from 9 to 7, and this is easily one of the most surprising teams on the NFL season to be this high in the power rankings and have this record. The only reason I say one of the most surprising is we still do have one team that's also pretty surprising to come on our power rankings, but the Washington Commanders, I don't think anybody had this team going this high. Yes, they had the 2nd overall pick and brought in Jaden Daniels, but I don't think anyone had Jaden Daniels improving this team this much. I mean, the Commanders were probably the worst team in the NFL last year, at least after they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young. Yes, maybe the Carolina Panthers were still a worse team, but it was really close between the Commanders and the Panthers who was worse after the Commanders traded away their top 2 edge rushers at the deadline last year. Additionally, the Commanders let a number of top players walk in free agency. And so bringing in Jaden Daniels and then guys like Austin Eckler didn't seem like it would be enough to throw this team to being one of the competitive teams in the NFL. Yeah, if Jaden Daniels was a stud, you maybe saw like a 7-10 and 8-9 record coming their way, especially given they have 2 games against the Giants, and with what we've seen from the Cowboys this season, those games might have been a little bit easier. But instead, the Washington Commanders have absolutely dominated pretty much since the jump of this NFL season. They're 7-2. They look very competitive. Their offense is great. They added Marshawn Lattimore at the trade deadline to their defense, which should vastly improve that unit, which was definitely the Achilles heel of this team. And if it does massively improve the unit, then the Commanders are legit and absolutely belong here at number 7 on our power ranking. At number 6 on our power ranking, we have the Pittsburgh Steelers moving up 1 spot from last week's iteration. And the only reason they moved up 1 spot was primarily because the Green Bay Packers dropped a fair bit. The Steelers were on bye this past week, so weren't able to show anything in terms of where they belong in the power rankings compared to everybody else. But with the Packers dropping, they slot up at number 6. I understand. The Steelers are significantly higher on my power rankings than on most power rankings. A lot of people out there would probably look at this and think this is laughably high for a team like the Pittsburgh Steelers, especially given a lot of people think they're frauds, especially with Russell Wilson at quarterback. I'm here to tell you, if you think that, you're wrong. And that's because the Steelers have an absolutely deadly defense. And we can't forget that defense wins championships. We never like to talk about it. I mean, look at the Kansas City Chiefs last year. Mahomes was mediocre for a significant portion of the season, but the Chiefs still won the Super Bowl on the back of their defense. The Patriots were always one of the best teams winning Super Bowls because their defense under Bill Belichick, a defensive-minded head coach, was really strong. Yeah, they had Tom Brady, and Tom Brady was very, very good. I'm not taking that away from him. But the only reason they won as often as they did was because they had a really good defense along with Tom Brady. I mean, to be clear, if you look at that Patriots Super Bowl history, Tom Brady's best Super Bowl performance was against the Eagles in a Super Bowl that the Patriots lost. Like, literally, his best offensive performance, they lost because the defense didn't show up against Nick Foles. And so that's what I mean by defenses win championships. And the Steelers have had a great defense for years. I mean, they made the playoffs at 10-7 last year in spite their terrible quarterback play. Russell Wilson is a significant upgrade over the quarterbacks that the Steelers have had in recent years. And so I absolutely consider them a top-tier team in the NFL because Russell Wilson and this offense can do enough to allow the defense to do its thing and win the Steelers football games. At number 5, moving up one spot in our power rankings, we have the Minnesota Vikings. Similar to the Steelers, they are moving up one spot in the power rankings, primarily because of the Green Bay Packers plummeting down 5 spots, and their 6-2 record is also nothing to sneeze at. They ended up winning on Sunday Night Football against the Indianapolis Colts in a game that maybe shouldn't have been so close given how the Colts played and Joe Flacco played in that game, but the Vikings still got back in the win column. Their defense is really good and might be a reason why Joe Flacco had such a problem on Sunday Night Football. And Sam Darnold and the offense still looked very capable. This is a really good football team. They're 6-2 for a reason. They beat some very good football teams, including the Green Bay Packers and the Houston Texans, 2 teams already in our top 10 that you've seen. And they barely lost on a last-second field goal to the Lions, one of the few remaining teams that has yet to appear on this power ranking. So this is not a soft 6-2 record that the Vikings have. This is a very, very tough 6-2 record that they're sporting, and they definitely belong here at number 5 on our power rankings. At number 4 on our power rankings, moving up one spot, we have the Baltimore Ravens, our last of our 3 lost teams. And the Ravens are so high on this list in spite their 3 losses because they've looked damn good in their wins. And I mean damn good. Yes, this team has lost to the Cleveland Browns and the Las Vegas Raiders. And if you wanted to knock this team down significantly because of those losses, I understand it. This is absolutely a team that just sometimes doesn't show up. And when it comes to the playoffs, given they're likely not going to be in the number 1 seed, they got to win 4 playoff games in a row to win a Super Bowl. And what we've seen from this team in terms of how infrequently they show up compared to some other teams, winning 4 games in a row might not be so easy. But when they do show up, I don't know if there's a team in the NFL that can take on the Baltimore Ravens. With how good a 1-2 punch Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry are, I mean, how do you stop this team? If you cue the run, they're just going to pass it over you. If you cue the pass, they're just going to run it down your throat. If you somehow manage to cue the run and the pass, well then Lamar Jackson is just going to scramble on his own, and you can't stop that because you have to cue on everything else. This team is really good. Their offense is phenomenal. Their defense leaves a little bit to be desired, but I still think it's a fairly good unit, and they are one of the best teams in the NFL, which is why they're number 4 on this power ranking. But they're definitely going to need to figure out their inconsistent play and when they show up for games if they're going to have any shot at winning the Super Bowl over some of the other AFC powerhouses in 2024. Now on to number 3 in our power rankings. We have the Buffalo Bills moving up one spot from number 4 on last week's iteration. The Bills barely got past the Miami Dolphins, a pretty lowly rated team, thanks to a 61-yard field goal from Tyler Bass. Finally, Bills fans can be happy with their kicker until, next week or the week after when he missed an extra point and Bills fans want his head again, because that's just the circle of life in Buffalo. Either way, though, the Buffalo Bills look like a really good football team. Their defense is pretty good. I wouldn't say it's great, but it's pretty good. It can keep them in games, and Josh Allen is Josh Allen. I believe it is a 3-way race for NFL MVP right now. It's Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, and Jared Goff. Yet to come on this list, you already know he's going to be 1 or 2 with the remaining teams left. Additionally, Amari Cooper missed this past game, but he's going to get integrated into this offense and be an absolute boon for this team. James Cook, Ray Davis are a 1-2 punch that any team would love to have running for them. And so this offense has so many options to beat you. They want to run the football, but they can throw it to Shakir, to Kincaid, to Cooper if they need to. Josh Allen is still Josh Allen, and there's a reason this team is number 3 in our power rankings. And if they can beat the Chiefs when they play them later this season, it will only take one loss from the Chiefs for the Bills to move into that number 1 spot in the AFC. And given how weak the AFC East is, I mean, look at the teams, Jets, Patriots, and Dolphins. The Buffalo Bills should be able to lock up this division without much issue and might even sneak their way into the number 1 seed if they're able to get some lucky breaks with the Chiefs losing some games. And at number 2 on our power rankings, holding pat from last week, and frankly holding pat for like a month and a half at this point, we have the Detroit Lions sitting at 7-1. I was all ready to put the Detroit Lions into the number 1 spot on this power rankings during Monday Night Football. I thought the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were going to do what no other team had been able to do in 2024 and take down the Kansas City Chiefs. However, they failed to go for 2. They absolutely blew it. The Chiefs remain undefeated, and so we already know they're going to be number 1 on this power ranking. Shh, I'm giving it away. Don't hate me. But it also means that with the Lions having 1 loss, the Chiefs having no losses, and being the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions, I just can't put the Lions up to number 1. Of course I want to. I'm a Lions fan. And at least on the field, the Lions have looked like the best team in the NFL. But the Kansas City Chiefs have seemed like they've had a neutered version of Patrick Mahomes all year. And I just refuse to fall into the absolute stupidity that is thinking Mahomes is not a good quarterback anymore and that the Chiefs are a weaker team and only getting lucky and winning because of the refs. Because while I acknowledge they have had a lot of help from the refs, the Chiefs are still a damn good football club and they cannot be trifled with, because the second you start to think that they're not as good, that's when they kick you out of the building. And so I have the Lions coming in at number 2. They look really, really good. They've been fantastic. They have a gauntlet of AFC South teams, which I think the Lions can win all those games. It wouldn't be too out of the question to see them going 10-1 by the end of that stretch. But given that 1 loss to the Buccaneers and the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs beat the Buccaneers, even though it was a neutered version of the Buccaneers, the Lions are at 2 and the Chiefs are at number 1. I'm not going to talk too much about the Kansas City Chiefs here at number 1 because, again, we know they're number 1. We know they're undefeated. We know they're the 2-time defending Super Bowl champions. Let's just move on. They're number 1. That's it. And so that's it for this week's version of the NFL Power Rankings. But as always, that is not it for the video, as we still pick our Thursday night matchup. This week we got the Bengals visiting the Ravens, which should be a fantastic Thursday night football game, though I'm still a little bit scarred from last year's iteration of this game where Joe Burrow injured himself for the rest of the season, and this was actually a really stinky Thursday night football game. I'm hoping it's not this time around, but I'm a little bit wary because of what we saw last year. In terms of this matchup, this is a really, really tough matchup to call. The Cincinnati Bengals absolutely need to win this football game. They are 4-5. Going to 4-6 is going to be very tough to come back from. They might only have 1 loss left to give if they lose this game and need, 6 wins in that time. That's going to be tough for any team to pull off, even as good as the Cincinnati Bengals can be. And so this really is a must-win game for the Bengals. However, the Ravens already beat the Bengals in an absolute shootout earlier this season, and that was in Cincinnati. While this is a Thursday night football game, and these games tend to be a bit of a crapshoot, I am going to go with the home team, the Baltimore Ravens, to win this game, but I struggled to pick this one. I think I would go with the home team no matter what, because these are really good teams. Thursday night football is a bit of a crapshoot. The Bengals need this game, but I think the Ravens will want to win because of the rivalry game and because they lost a pretty bad game to the Browns in the division only a couple weeks ago. They don't want another divisional loss on their hands, especially given the Steelers are still half a game up on the Ravens in the standings, and the Ravens have 2 games remaining against the Steelers to round out the season. And so I have the Ravens pulling this one out at home, but it's going to be very close in my estimation. And so that's it for this week's video. I hope you all enjoyed. If you did, remember to leave a like and comment down below. Help us out, help us grow. I will see you all next time. Peace!